I planned a quiet day with an ugly thermos and a rail yard that never makes the news, and I ended up chasing a passenger car that cheats maps. The email started before sunrise with the same photo from 3 different cities, which made my head hurt before the coffee even landed. The car wore a tired blue stripe, and a shallow dent lived over the second window like an old scar. A greasy handprint sat beside the door button in exactly the same spot every time, which told me I wasn't looking at 3 different derelicts with a shared paint scheme. I was looking at one car that appeared wherever it wanted, on spurs that should not carry anything heavier than weeds and regret. I drove to a shuttered mill where the spur climbs out of gravel and disappears under a fence line nobody patched this decade. A yard manager with 3 decades of experience had sent me phone footage of the car gliding past the literal end of steel without bending the fence wire, and his voice sounded like ground glass when he told me on the phone that he was done waiting around to see it a 3rd time. I wrote down the location, I packed a recorder, and I told myself I would document from a safe distance like a responsible adult who knows his limits when the air tastes like a transformer that just popped. The spur ran behind the old loading dock, with a nest of fox kits under the cracked concrete ramp. Wildflowers pushed between rotted ties, and a faded soda can sat half sunk in that sticky mud that pretends to be solid until your heel proves otherwise. I paced the length, counted ties, checked angles for a tripod I never unbag, and tried not to watch the fence too hard because it felt like watching a stage that might suddenly grow an actor. Cicadas sang the same repetitive bar that can calm you when your pulse listens, and the smell mixed hot creosote with a damp dust tang that never leaves mill yards, even after the last shift clock dies. I turned to write the tie count on a card, and the temperature shifted down like a room where the AC kicks on with the vents closed. The cicadas went silent so hard it felt like someone had sucked the sound out with a shop vac. Shadows changed direction, and the car stood on the spur where nothing had stood a breath before that breath. The blue stripe looked tired and honest, the dent sat right where the photos claimed, and the greasy handprint had a streak down the palm as if someone once set their hand there and slid it an inch while doors hissed. The door opened with an old transit sigh that lives in the ribs if you grew up near rails. I heard fluorescents hum before I saw light. I told myself I would keep my distance because I enjoy using 10 fingers to button shirts, and I stepped inside anyway because doors ask for answers and feet sometimes answer before brains clear their throats. The threshold felt cool the way steel keeps shade inside itself, and the air held a thin, almost sweet chemical note that made my tongue push back against my teeth. The doors closed behind me without ceremony, and the car started to move with a glide that upset my inner ear, because the wheels never found a rail joint to talk to. My stomach waited for the predictable clack rhythm that trains use to say hello, and the hum answered instead with a steady note that climbed into the bones behind my jaw. I sat near the door because learned habits bend decision trees without asking permission, and I looked out the crystal clean window because pretending to ignore horror only makes it borrow your voice later. The yard wasn't outside anymore, and I felt that drop in my chest that movies exaggerate and bodies recognize anyway. We slid through a tunnel that didn't belong to any municipal plan, and the walls were not poured or bricked or rock board because they were bone cut and trued and tiled with a patience that made my scalp tighten. Long runs of femurs made clean strakes with squared ends, pelvises formed keystones that met overhead like a cathedral someone made from a medical catalog, and ribs bent in repeated arches that turned space into a mouth that never learned to swallow. I smelled that disinfectant cold tang you catch near dental trays mixed with old oil that seeped into porous surfaces decades before crews lost names. The tunnel opened wider every few hundred feet into chambers where station geometry almost existed, and the bone lattice there hid a crowd that never stepped forward and never needed to, because bodies pressed in close enough to be felt while features hid in that wrong light that makes teeth visible before eyes. The sound came from them or the walls or the system that uses them, and the sound landed as a work rhythm that felt like a lullaby you knew as a kid and forgot because it made nap time unavoidable. The pattern went click, then click click, then a held breath long enough to make my chest tighten in sympathy, and then another click and a soft sigh that moved the hairs on my forearms. The beat nested inside my breathing without permission, and I had to count seconds on my thumbnail to break it because I didn't want my lungs to work on someone else's shift. I took the recorder out of my pocket and spoke, because naming a thing without metaphors is the only power I trust when doors decide you're out. I said my name, and the date, and the location, and the observable facts, and my voice came back half a heartbeat later through old speakers with that papery edge that turns S's into practice for dental dams. I heard myself with myself, and the doubled shape made me want to clear my throat hard enough to eject a ghost I would rather not host. I kept the recorder close and said the tunnel was bone. The stations hid crowds, the light had no source I could point to, and the smell would feel familiar if you ever pressed your face too close to a cold tray in a nurse's hand. Weight settled on the back of my neck like a glove that wants to be a hand and wants you to relax because the routine cannot begin until you comply. The weight didn't press, and my shoulders tightened anyway, and I kept my hands on my knees because I learned a long time ago that sudden gestures in rooms you don't understand can turn explanations into eulogies. The lights dimmed one step, and the tags appeared beyond the glass, and those tags were small flexible slivers hung on pegs drilled into the bone, and every tag had a little punched hole, or 3 or 7, and some had damp edges that made the tunnel smell like copper from a penny you kept in your mouth as a kid when nobody watched. I heard the click, then the double click, and the pause ran just long enough to make the back of my eyes ache again, and I said out loud that I didn't have fare, because my mouth believed this still asked for coins, and my rational mind cut me a look for embarrassing us both. The weight did not lift, and the car slowed without slowing because motion here lived in the middle ear and not the view. And I pressed my tongue into a molar until a tooth warned me it would take badly to my bad ideas. 2 seats back on the opposite side, a woman sat where no one had sat when I came in, and I flinched so hard my knee told my femur we were probably done running after all those promises about never stopping. She wore a grocery store polo with a taped name badge, and her hair looked damp the way hair looks after someone walked through a mist that doesn't care whether the forecast agrees. She kept her hands flat on her thighs, like she had been told more than once to stop fidgeting because it makes customers nervous. The side of one finger wore a band-aid that had bled and dried and bled again, and the band-aid had 3 little neat holes lined up like tiny planets nobody gets to visit. "Tara," I said, because I could read the badge and I needed another voice to make my own voice act right. "Can you hear me? And can you talk? And do you want me to shut up right now? Because I can do that if you need space." She kept her eyes on the window and spoke in that careful tone you use when your boss is on the other end of the aisle and a toddler is about to pull a display over anyway.
It takes what it wants, and it takes it cleaner if you don't argue, and it gets sloppy if you do,
she said, and the rhythm of her words slid under the click pattern like a song that finally finds a harmony that does not help anyone breathe. "How do we get off?" I asked, and I kept my voice low, because the weight on my neck grew curious when vowels rose, and I prefer curiosity from people who bleed.
"The door opens when the route thinks you are done,"
she said, and the way she said route made my stomach argue about the word plan.
"You can jump if you want to find out whether the floor out there wants to catch you or cut you, and I do not recommend you test the question with bones you intend to keep."
I wanted to ask who told her that, and my brain coughed up an image of tags spinning and chiming faster when bodies drop. And I kept the question in the mouth where words go to die before they embarrass everyone. The lights dipped again, and the tags outside spun faster on their pegs, and the chiming got a little bell tone that struck pretty before the meaning pushed back. I glanced to see if the door seam glowed because that would mean station, and the seam stayed dark, and the weight on my neck shifted toward my ear like it wanted to ask whether I believed in grace.
"Don't keep anything you are unwilling to lose,"
Tara said, and her eyes stayed forward and her jaw clenched when she swallowed, and I saw a tremor run down her sleeve that didn't look like fear so much as muscle memory learning a new pace.
"I tried to keep my keys because my kid made a little silver letter fob, and the car took the keys and the ring finger, and the hole healed without drama, and now I can hold a hand and bag a gallon but cannot make a fist right, and maybe that's something like a lesson if you like lessons, which I do not."
I set my keys on the seat beside me because I'm not immune to good advice, even when my nerves are writing poetry on my organs. I set my wallet on the floor in the aisle because I wanted the system to see I'd declared a tithe, and I slid my phone out with a voice memo still rolling because evidence is the only food my stubborn side trusts when fear spends the grocery money. I looked at my hands and decided they were mine today, then flexed my fingers because knowing what works beats guessing about what hurts. The motion changed with that ear trick glide again, and the windows showed a widened chamber with a central spine column drilled with rows of pegs, like the world's worst coat rack. The tags there spun so fast they sounded like a high, thin rain across tin. The door opened without the normal station rush of air, and Bone Edges waited a half step from the sill with no platform to honor old contracts. Tara's breath hitched the way breath hitches when a muscle remembers the last time you stretched it wrong. She pressed her palms into her eyes for one beat, let them fall, and then the seat beside her held 3 tiny round chads of skin as precise as any hotel hole punch cutout. Tara wasn't in the car anymore. My mouth made a sound that didn't grant me dignity. The door closed without admitting there'd been a door, and the weight on my neck relaxed by 0.5 millimeter. My hearing found the click pattern again because silence tastes like panic when you're expecting structure. I told the recorder Tara had been here and then wasn't, and I explained the chads because I'm a completionist when fear hands me a checklist. I said I didn't know whether we'd stop where a map has jurisdiction, and I said I didn't intend to fall into whatever waited beyond those bone edges. I also said I didn't have fair, because words that fail once sometimes get lucky on the second pitch. The weight leaned closer and touched the rim of my ear without announcing an intention. The sting made me curse softly. That body part has a lot of feelings about sharp tools. And I dragged breath through my teeth and kept my hands visible and still. The bite eased away like a tool coming off a jig and settled at the pad of my left ring finger. 3 truths snapped into place at once. The car was asking for a piece. It liked to match the size of what you tried to keep, and I'd already offered it a wallet, keys, and a phone like a coward who values numbers more than naming rights. "Take the dumb things," I said, voice shaking in that thin way you hate hearing later in transcription. "Take the wallet and the phone and the keys. Leave my hands alone. I need them. Mark me for fair with paper and plastic if you want your bookkeeping ritual. I won't fight you if you touch what I've already put down." The car didn't honor speeches and never promised terms. A cold punch snapped through the pad of my ring finger with crisp mechanical certainty, the last half second of a stapler, and pain flared bright and mean. Then died responsible and fast, because whatever did it also sealed the edges to keep drama out of the aisle. Blood welled and stopped with an unhelpful professionalism. The hole had the diameter of a reinforcement ring from a school binder. I stared at it, swallowed that dry swallow you use when your mouth wants to drink a whole faucet, and said a word that can file taxes under the wrong name. The hum settled back to baseline. The windows narrowed to bone again. The tags slowed to something you could almost mistake for pleasant wind if your brain ran out of honest labels. The door opened on the mill yard like it hadn't spent a second offering extra-jurisdictional tunnel tours. Heat hit my face with the relief of normal physics. I picked up my wallet and keys and phone because muscle memory's louder than vows. I stepped down. The doors closed. The car softened at the edges like a mirage and was gone. I stood there with a hole in my finger, and that hum still grinding lightly on the nerves that connect ear canals to stubborn places. Weeds waved like weeds always wave near steel. I waited for cicadas because their racket means the world remembers how to run simple loops without supervision. They came back ragged, then found their groove. I breathed through my nose until the chemical citrus flushed out, and the yard smelled like heat, old wood, and wet rust again. I said out loud I'd learned enough for one morning. That was only partly a lie. I write my lies down where I can interrogate them later. I went home and washed the hole with water that ran too cold to argue. The sting traveled up my palm and back like a polite train rehearsing a short route. I taped a pad over it because padding encourages bravery I can't recommend, but also can't quit. I ate crackers with so much salt, the roof of my mouth filed a complaint. Then I sat at the counter and listened to my apartment hum with cheap fan motors, a neighbor's dryer, and streetlights that sing to themselves when the air turns to soup. The click pattern hid inside those noises. I breathed on fives until the rhythm missed and fell behind. I kept the lamp off because light makes rooms lonelier when you're trying to get back to a smaller normal. I didn't sleep well. The dreams mixed practical worries with architectural crimes. When I woke up, my phone was full of messages from people who swear they saw the car near a museum in one city, a park in another, and a half-buried spur behind a big box store that loves pretending it helps communities. I mapped them and hated the curve that emerged between pins. I circled the 5th of the month because reports bunch there. I wrote 2 names beside it because survivors tend to answer when they feel like their parts deserve documentation. The first survivor met me in a park with a splash pad and too many hornets by an overfull trash can. She wore a hoodie despite a heat index that melts candy in your pocket before you remember it's there. She kept the left side folded back like she'd made peace with showing more than some people can handle. The neat absence where an ear should live made the heat feel colder than shade allows. I described the recorder, what I'd do with her words, and that she'd set the pace. She nodded, not her first unpleasant task of the week. "Lena," I said, keeping my voice conversational because pity makes people lock down and I needed facts more than a performance of empathy. "Thanks for meeting me. Thanks for letting me record. You set the pace." She watched water arc over painted pads and yelled happy kids. The first breath scraped, the rest came smooth.
"I'm doing the beat straight,"
she said, folding and unfolding her hands like she was teaching them patience.
"I stepped in because the car felt safe. Safety sells hard when you're running on no sleep. The doors closed before I sat down because doors here never wait for you to second-guess your worst ideas."
She touched the neat absence by her temple. A laugh tried to happen and didn't.
"The windows were clean enough to make me feel like my shirt needed a second wash. The tunnel wasn't concrete or rock or city. It smelled like a dentist mask you keep on too long and soup that gave up being warm yesterday. The walls were bone the way old men think walls should be, brick. Permanent and proud and stupid."
She kept talking because stopping would break something she'd built to make this possible.
The crowd didn't chant words. Faces didn't help. The rhythm worked like someone punching tickets for the world's most careful carnival. The click lived in my teeth until the door opened on a hole instead of a platform, and that hole smelled like wet metal, bad soup, and apologies after the fact.
I asked how long she thought she'd stayed. She rolled the question around like it had sharp edges.
I counted to 17 twice between the double click and the next click. Then I lost it and got mad at myself for acting like math could save skin. There was a cold little kiss by my ear, like a moth with metal bones. And I heard the punch right before the car decided it was morning, even if the sky didn't agree. I kept my head straight because everyone tells you not to faint when you're salvaging dignity.
She lifted the hoodie again so the air touched skin that heals too neatly. Then she looked at me like she wanted honesty and would spit on comfort.
I know why it chose the ear. I listened so hard I forgot to pretend I didn't. The car likes records that match your sins. Maybe that sounds poetic and dumb. I don't mean it that way. It still sits right in my mouth when I say it fast.
She hears the punch beat in fans, overpasses, and refrigeration cycles now. Taping cotton over the hole helps at night. A soft lie beats a hard truth after 3 a.m. A tag with her name hangs on a fence near where she boarded. She left it there. Bringing it home felt like feeding a dog that'll learn the path to your door. I walked her to the street. She gave that short wave that says more than a hug when boundaries keep you upright. I logged Lena with time, place, and transcript clean words. I updated the map, added the milliard and 3 more cities, and drew lines that formed an ugly geometry only superstition enjoys, which I don't. The 5th glowed on my calendar without a backlight because my pulse decided to mark it with a full drum kit. I told myself I wouldn't board again because I'm not a tourist in my own harm. I was still at the spur before dawn with a bag of batteries and a body full of lousy sleep. The car arrived like sudden weather on a lake when wind flips direction and everyone pretends they planned for that. The doors opened and asked a question I refused to answer until my feet did it for me. I sat in the same seat, repeating positions reduces variables, and stared through crystal glass while bone pretended to be architecture and the cadence clicked like a habit you swear you broke last month. I said my name into the recorder and felt the small delay come back through the ceiling speakers. I held my breath until my voice and the speaker voice matched, then let go so my brain would stop yelling about it. I set my keys on the seat, my phone on the cushion, and slipped my belt off to drape it over the seat back like neatness still mattered. The weight on my neck shifted, considered my left hand, and gave that polite mechanical nibble that asks if the ring finger wants to play nice. I told the air I'd prefer to pay with plastic. The air declined. The punch landed quick and skilled and without malice. The door sighed. The yard snapped back. I left without saying thanks because gratitude felt like ritual and ritual felt like consent. My bones wanted fewer contracts today. I waited in the weeds until the air warmed and the insects found their groove. Then I went home and did practical chores that keep heads from spinning until dizziness forgets your name. Tara's message hit later. full of fluorescent bathroom acoustics and paper towel harmonics, the sound of a break that's too short, and a clock that lies.
You're gonna tell them to stay off.
She said, water running thin to cover words she didn't want the next person at the sink to hear.
Do it. Some people need the permission to do the smart thing. I needed it. Nobody gave it. The door opened. I walked anyway.
She breathed, then kept going, because breaks end and bosses don't.
If they step in because the door behaves like gravity, tell them to decide before the car decides for them. The choice hurts less than the guess. Fingers heal. Keys don't need funerals. Don't sit by the door just because it looks like an exit. Don't look for faces in the crowd. Faces are how the rhythm gets into your breathing.
I saved the memo and boxed 2 sentences because I need the reminder. Machines can run on consent without asking for any. It feels like a paradox until you accept that consent gets stolen all the time by questions you never get to answer out loud. The map stayed on the wall. I circled the 5th and the 11th because clusters like to pretend they're coincidences when you've got company. I told 2 people privately to avoid 3 spurs for the next 48 hours. I ate salted rice with eggs because food that sticks to ribs helps after windows have shown bone as decor. The finger holes stayed clean and tidy, like paperwork completed by a clerk who loves stamps. Hot water pulsed heat through them at night, and I was grateful for honest pain because dishonest pain wastes time you don't get back. 2 evenings later, I walked the spur at dusk because foxes tend to appear then, and I like creatures that live without checking their phones. A small clear tag hung from bent coat hanger wire near the fence where the car loves to be. Someone had written Evan on it with a marker that bleeds into plastic in a soft halo every teacher recognizes. 1 neat hole sat dead center. I left it. Bringing it home would feed a ledger that never stops adding columns once you trust it to keep accounts for you. When I opened my notebook that night, a circular scrap the size of a reinforcement ring slipped out near the back. 3 brown dots made a small triangle on the paper. I slid it into a sleeve like a coward a museum would call a preservationist. Then I wrote down the urge to throw it away so I could watch that urge fade without worrying the record would starve if I stopped feeding it lies. I don't know how the scrap got there. I don't enjoy writing that sentence. I let it stay anyway. Fighting every battle burns more fuel than I've got. The car keeps appearing on dead tracks in cities that shouldn't share rolling stock. Anyone who boards rides tunnels tiled with bone while a crowd chants a punch beat that sneaks into your lungs. Survivors come back, altered, neat, missing parts that heal too well, marked with the clean little holes of a ticket that's been checked. I've heard about people who lost more than ears and pads of fingers. I'm not including those here. Graphic trauma feeds the same ledger even when you call it journalism, and I can feel the showman's voice trying to rise in my throat whenever gore pretends it'll help. So here's the plain version for anyone who finds this, because search still prefers words to warnings. If the car opens for you, decide fast whether you'll board or walk. Both choices charge in different currencies. No discount for hesitation. If you board, keep your pockets light, your head up, your eyes on the glass. Keep your breathing yours by counting odd numbers that won't lock to the click. If the door opens onto bone instead of a platform, don't step just to prove a point about gravity. Gravity wins, whether you align with it or not. If you have to pay small with something you already agreed to lose before the hum learned your name. Don't haggle terms with a system that's never lost arbitration. If you come back altered, which happens more than a city council will admit, wash the place gently. Tape soft cotton if it helps you sleep. Tell one friend the truth even if you plan to give everyone else a softer version. Truth keeps the click from colonizing every quiet room. Don't bring home tags with your name. Don't burn them either. Theatrics tell ledgers you care. Let weather take them down. Let sun make them brittle. Let time do slow, honest work. Crowds can't speed up no matter how hard they chant. Will I ride again? The answer changes with coffee and with bandages. You'll get both, to keep me honest. I won't go back in. I've got enough. That sounds careful and virtuous when daylight fills rooms with easy choices. I'll go back in. Doors that ask questions get answers from feet that learned politeness before restraint. That sounds dangerous and weak and unfortunately human. If I ride again, I'll put my phone down, pick a cheap sacrifice that scars only the ledger, keep my eyes open long enough to watch tags spin without letting the sound decide my lungs, and step out when the yard returns without saying thanks. It's not a favor, it's a transaction.
Tell them the choice hurts less than the guess.
Tara said in that memo that smelled like paper towels.
Don't sit by the door just because it looks like an exit.
I'm telling you because stories sometimes keep hands attached that might otherwise learn new shapes. If you hear the click hiding in your apartment hum tonight, move one chair, or open and close one drawer. Small choices take soil away from the beat before it roots too deep. Eat something salty, drink water, keep one light on in a room that doesn't echo. If a tag appears on your fence tomorrow, wave at it with the politeness you reserve for neighbors you hope will move. Let rain and sun handle the rest. The pins on my map keep shifting. I'm not publishing exact spots coordinates turn into invitations, and I won't feed that kind of tourism. Know this instead. The 5th spikes in multiple regions, the 11th hums like a second chorus, and the 22nd aches like a tooth when storms move in. If your commute passes a spur that used to be a hiking trail before budgets broke promises, leave 5 minutes early and take the sidewalk that adds steps your body will thank you for next year anyway. I'll end here because endings help people close tabs in their heads, and because I want to leave you with one instruction that doesn't ask for bravery you may not have after the week you've had. If a derelict with a tired blue stripe and a dent over the second window shows up where the map says only weeds should grow, and the door slides open with that old sigh that remembers monthly passes, and the air carries citrus chemical over cold steel, and your feet get chatty while your brain files motions, put your hand on your chest and name the thing you can afford to lose. Put it down where the car can see it. Keep the rest of you where you live. When the yard returns, step out like you've done it before. Walk home in heat and bugs and traffic. Make coffee that tastes like sink water because it's yours. Leave the radio off at the fuse if Hiss tries to sell you numbers you don't want in your head. I'm still here, a 2 neat dot in my finger, and a ledger that can mind its business until it doesn't. I'll keep mapping, counting, telling the truth without bows. I'll keep my wallet lighter and my pockets emptier near fences that remember trains. I'll keep my eyes on the glass when tunnels try to teach lungs to sing. If you ride, come back. Be altered in ways that spare vital verbs. Tell someone you trust what the beat did to your breathing so it can't keep all its winnings. Decide fast. Pay small. Walk away. Eat something salty while the hum forgets your name.